I'm here today with Senator Wes Hayes from Rock Hill in York County. Senator Hayes is chairman of the Ethics Committee. Thank you for being here today, Senator
My pleasure.
Hayes.
Thank you.
So while we're talking about the Ethics Committee, I was wondering what's going on in the committee right now and what bills do you expect to hit the floor of the State House?
Well, things are pretty quiet as far as ethics law. So I don't think there's going to be any really pressing things on the Senate side. We're going to, we're transitioning over to online filing, where it'll make it a lot easier to file, but also a lot easier for the people in the state to view the filings. So I think it'll bring in more sunlight to what we're trying to do. So I think that initiative is probably the biggest ethics initiative that's going on now.
Well, that is certainly a big one. I'm glad to hear that we're doing that. Aside from the ethics side, what bills are you sponsoring this year, and what are your big issues this year?
Well, one of the big issues that I'm facing up in my area is the interbasin transfer up in North Carolina, which has kind of brought to light the fact that we don't have a very good handle in South Carolina on surface water, that's from lakes and from rivers, surface water withdrawal. And so I plan to introduce a bill that would require permitting for large users of surface water, such as cities and power companies and big industries, some large farms. Those people will have to get a permit so that we can get a handle on how much use we have in South Carolina, where it is, because it's a limited resource. And really the people that are using it need to have some type of permitting to protect their interest, because somebody upstream could come in and take their water. So it's kind of, in a way, taking the old riparian water rights and putting it in a permit statute. So I think it'll help us. It'll help us in dealing with North Carolina. They're looking at doing the same thing. Georgia already has a similar law. So I think it'll help us. These issues over water, we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. We're seeing it in the Savannah River. We're seeing it with Savannah taking water from the aquifer down around Beaufort. Atlanta wanting to get the Savannah River. So I mean, we're just in the Catawba River up in my area. It's just one of many battles that are going on or will go on concerning surface water. So that's a big issue to me. Another issue that I've been working on is school funding. I've been appointed on a committee, a bipartisan committee, three Democrats, 3 Republicans in the Senate, to look at education funding from top to bottom, but particularly in light of the property tax swap we did last year, because that kind of changes the whole ball game as far as how schools are funded, because you take owner-occupied houses out of the mix for property taxes. So it was a good time for us to look at how the money is distributed in light of the swap we did last year. And I think we're making some progress there. We've got a bill that was introduced recently, just passed the Finance Committee yesterday, that's correcting some things that were done last year. No major changes, but just some small things. But we're wrestling with some bigger issues on this, which I think could have some far-reaching effects. One of the things we're looking at is shifting more responsibility from locals to the state as far as funding schools. You know, we generally on the Education Finance Act, that's how most of the money is distributed, and that requires, on a statewide average, 70% state, 30% local. So when we go up on the base student cost in the state, we also force the locals to go up on what they have to spend per student. And when we take the owner-occupied houses out of the mix and we put a cap on what they can raise on taxes in local government, then I think it makes sense to us to maybe shift some of that burden to the state, away from local government as part of the Finance Act. That's one of the big things that we're looking at. So I think education finance would have to be certainly important to me. Early childhood is important. I'm also on a study committee that's chaired by Senator Setchler that's looking at taking the pilot on early childhood 4K that we passed last year and expanding it statewide. I think that money spent on early childhood is money well spent. I think that the science and educators both will tell you that that's when really you can have the biggest impact long term. Really the savings on society are phenomenal if you can get to a young person and early.
Would this be the type of K through third grade type funding? Because I have read that that's pretty much the most influential time in a child's development as far as reading, writing, arithmetic, and so forth.
No question, but you know, and that's important. I agree with you. But we're talking about pre-K, 4K,
okay.
and then 0 to 3. And of course, First Steps has been working in that area with the private sector. A lot of your school districts have 4Ks now, and we have this pilot program we passed last year in the plaintiff districts for the lawsuit for the at-risk children. So we're making strides toward the 4K, but we're not there yet, and we're not sure who's going to be in charge of the program, how the private and the public sector are going to work together. We've got a lot of issues still out there, but it's worth the fight, it's worth the effort.
It certainly is. All right, just one last question. Another major issue that's kind of on the table right now is DOT restructuring. A bunch of people have been talking about this. The governor has, Senator Peeler has. What direction do you think the DOT should take from the place it is right now?
Well, I think that you really need to have some central control. I think the governor has to have more control over the Department of Transportation. When you have so much diverse control, you really have nobody. When responsibility is spread out over so many people, really nobody's responsible. And you know, you've got basically, you know, each congressional district now is represented by an elected person by the delegation, House and Senate members from that particular area, and then they choose the executive director, and the governor appoints the chairman of the commission. So it's kind of a hodgepodge. The governor somewhat, the legislature somewhat, you got a commission that's somewhat responsible, so you really don't have anybody responsible. And something as important to our future as transportation, I think needs to have some central control, somebody that we can hold responsible, an elected official to be held responsible for a DOT. It's a crucial part of the executive branch. So if you're going to have a cabinet or a limited cabinet form of government, you really need to have DOT come somewhat, if not completely, but at least somewhat under the control of the executive. So I think the governor needs to have more control. I've heard various proposals that are being looked at. I think one has the governor appointing the executive director and then having the still having a board that's partially appointed by the governor and still partially elected by the General Assembly. I think that would be a step in the right direction. So I'm not wed to any particular plan other than I think we need to shift more control on DOT to the government.
Well, thanks for being here today. We really appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you over the next session.
Thank you.